4 scopes, 8 to 10 power, $2,000. Let's go. Welcome back to Super CA. I'm your host, Paul. We're at our mobile deluxe video studios. Hope you like it. So speaking of deluxe, we're talking premium LPVOs. When we're talking premium optics, we're talking about spending major cash, like, major Trump bucks. So if you're not into that kind of thing, no problem at all. We did some budget scope reviews recently. I'll link it here. And additionally, we also had some top of the line scopes like a few months ago, which are all under $2,000, so you can check out here as well. So with that out of the way, we're looking at the best LPVOs right now. The Kahles K18i 1-8, the Nightforce ATACR 1-8, the Swarovski Z8i 1-8, and the Vortex Razor 1-10. Now in each of the previous videos, we looked at each of scopes in detail. In this review, we're going to do a little differently where we're going to list them by categories, and then we're going to pick one which performed the best according to each category. Then lastly, we'll move to some of the time drills for both short and long distance. I know we've been wanting to add that for a while to the channel, and we finally got a chance to do that. And we'll summarize with my pick for the best LPVO if I had to choose only one. So now we've got a lot to cover, so let's go. So reticle brightness, this is usually the very first thing that anyone asks when they're talking any LPVO is, can we actually see this thing in daylight? So just to make sure our terms are clear, when I say daylight bright, I'm talking red dot bright, not just, hey, it's gonna turn a certain shade of color when you're shooting into the shadow. So to me, that's usable, but when we're talking premium LPVOs, we need actual daylight bright reticle. So when it comes to that definition, this is how I see them stacking up. At the low end, we have the Kahles with its 2-dot design. The top dot being slightly larger than the bottom dot, and at max illumination, you can easily see both the red-orange dots against a bright noontime illuminated background. Although it's not blindingly bright as the others, it's still very, very good. Next up, we have the Swarovski, which takes a big step up from the Kahles with a larger and much brighter yellow-orange dot. One thing to note about the Swaro is that your head position really changes the amount of dot bloom quite a bit, so you only see the brightest light when you're directly behind it. For the runner-up position, it's the Vortex with a single yellowish dot that's very bright under daylight. I think it helps that it blooms quite a bit, as you can especially see on max illumination, so a bigger dot on our first focal plane optic is always a good thing since the dot gets really small at 1x. And taking the top spot is the Nightforce, which is so bright that you typically don't have to use max illumination under high noon daylight. Similar to the Vortex, you can see how big the reticle is at 8x, which translates into a bigger dot at 1x with some light spill into the surrounding reticle, which does seem to help visibility as well. So field of view, or eye box is closely related to that as well. But when we're talking field of view, we're primarily talking about 1x, but it does come into play in 8x as well. The bigger the field of view you have, the more closer it's going to be to red dot performance, which is all what we're looking for. Glass quality is somewhat subjective unless you're directly behind the lens. Primarily what we're looking for with glass quality is how clear it is in the center, how clear it is on the edges, at both 1 and 8x. With that in mind, this is how I see them measuring up in overall glass quality from least to best. Bringing up the rear, we have the Nightforce, which has the smallest field of view at 96.1. It's interesting given that this is a 34mm tube, but it ends up having a smaller field of view than an NX8, which had 106 feet. Having said all that, it's still very usable, but yes, you're going to notice there's a scope shadow around the edge. So as to overall glass quality, the Nightforce looked fine, I think, at 1x, but once you spin it up to 8x, it's a little bit hazy. It's not as clear as the other optics. This is even after working the diopter to try to sharpen the focus between target and reticle. We take a big step up with the Vortex at 116 feet, which is slightly larger than its predecessor, the 1-6, which came in at 115.2. So if you're upgrading from that scope, rest assured that you won't be losing anything when it comes to field of view. However, when it comes to overall glass quality at 1x, in our side-by-side comparisons, surprisingly we all prefer the 1-6. I think it has something to do with the amount of banding towards the edges of the scope. The 1-6 just looked clearer because of that. At max magnification, you really can't tell the difference between the two when it comes to glass quality, as you can see on these side-by-sides. And now at the runner-up and top positions, we have the two Austrians, Kahles and Swarovski. Likely the same glass from the same factory, both have the same field of view, 127.5 feet. So if you're looking for a scope that you can shoot like a red dot, it's been my experience that this is the closest you're gonna get, even though the Vortex is really close as well. For the differences in glass quality, you can especially see under magnification that when it comes to color, contrast, and edge clarity, European glass slightly edges out everyone else. So now we've talked all about the internals, the glass, and illumination. We'll move back into the outside and we're going to look at the controls. If you're looking for ammo, check out our sponsors, Impact Ammo, which offers extremely accurate, soft shooting, and clean burning ammo with competitive pricing. More info can be found in the description below, including a discount code. And now back to the video. Adjustment turrets can be a deciding factor. Primarily, we're not doing that on these. You notice they're all capped. So we're generally setting our zero and using our holds. But if you are dialing for long distance, then the precision of the adjustment turrets and how they feel as you click through them will matter a lot. This is how I see them stacking up. At the tail end, we have the Kahles, whose clicks register 0.36 inches at 100 yards. The clicks feel pretty good, although there's a little bit of play between them, so as you're clicking through them, it feels a little bit mushy. For returning to zero, use the index 0 mark, which you align by loosening the turrets with a large Phillips head on the top and side scope caps. Next up, we have the Nightforce with its 0.1 mil adjustments, which also translates into approximately 0.36 inches at 100 yards. Click-wise, it feels really stiff to move between the clicks, so you know it's not going to move once you set it, but just know that you're going to need more force than you realize. It also doesn't have a zero stop like the other Nightforce scopes, so you have to use an Allen key to loosen the caps and re-index the 0 mark for returning to 0. Aligning very closely with the Kahles is the Swarovski. Adjustment clicks are also 0.36 inches. Clicks feel a lot more positive when you're moving between them, so it's not as mushy as the Kahles, and it's certainly not as stiff as the Nightforce. Functionally, the Swaro separates itself from Kahles in the zero indexing method by using a toolless design, in that you can lift up an outer ring and set it back down once you align it with the 0 marks. So this is a much easier method than the Kahles. And taking the top crown is the Vortex, whose adjustment clicks are the most precise at 0.25 MOA. It's got a zero indexing method of loosening this hex screw on the top and the sides, so it's not as nice as some of the other optics. However, what separates the Vortex from the other optics is how good the clicks feel as you're moving through them, which almost perfectly blend the right amount of stiffness and still maintain a good amount of usability. So we looked at reticle brightness earlier in our internals, but what controls the reticle brightness is a lot of them on the left-hand side, the illumination knob or the brightness control, however you want to see it. They all operate quite similarly, although as far as like how well they do it, it varies quite a bit. So let's see how they stack up. So bringing up the rear is the Nightforce dial. The dial is easy to use and the designated numbers are easy to see. It also has off positions in between. You can see that as the gaps between the numbers. However, what we found slightly annoying is that once you arrive at the minimum and maximum ends, you can actually turn a little bit past the stops. And once you do that, the numbers are no longer correctly aligned. So it doesn't take much force to do this at all. Next up is the Kahles with a small turn dial with the right amount of friction to allow you to turn easily, but still enough friction to not have it move unless you really wanted to. There are no off positions in between, but at the top end the friction changes, so it allows you to graduate into a finer level of control for brightness. The runner-up is a Swarovski with its unique combination of flip switch for instant illumination and graduated buttons for finer control at the top. I'm a big fan of this type of control, as you can typically don't use anything other than low light and max illumination, so a flip switch makes a lot of sense. And if you still want finer control, you just use the push buttons on top. It's a great design. And taking the top choice is the Vortex, whose design, although unchanged since the 1.6 version, still eclipses those that came after. You've got pretty much everything you want. Off positions in between the illumination levels, an easy trip from minimum to maximum settings, and the one feature that separates it from the pack, a locking position so you know it's not going to move unless you really want it to. So robustness and usability don't typically go hand in hand, but Vortex continues to make it work flawlessly here. Okay, so when you're running and gunning or using LPVOs, the zoom lever controls the speed in which you go from minimum to maximum, and it's very, very important. So we're both going to look at the speed at which you can turn the zoom lever, what's included, and how it feels in the hand. At the low end, you'll find the Nightforce with a stiff and difficult to turn entire eyepiece rotation method. Although I like that they included a zoom lever, I found that it's not enough just to use one finger. You really have to grab the entire rear eyepiece with your hand, while at the same time putting your thumb on the lever to work it smoothly. Taking a big step up from there is the Vortex. You guys remember how stiff the original Razor 1.6 was, so Vortex improved upon it with the Gen 2e model. Now starting with this version, they both included the zoom lever, which was smart, and they made the entire 180-degree turn very smooth, so definitely doable with just one thumb. And at the runner-up position is the Swarovski. The friction is actually so smooth that it actually eclipses all the others on this list. However, it took runner-up because the only downside is you do have to buy the zoom lever, as it's not included in the 1.8 model, although it was included in the 1.6 model. And taking the top spot is the Kahles, with its included big lever. Actually, you get a choice of two sizes, so the big lever is shown here, but if you want the smaller one, no problem, that's included as well. As to turning it, the friction is smoother than the Vortex, although it's not as smooth as the liquid feeling Swarovski. Still, for traveling the 180-degree throw, it's extremely usable. So now that we've looked at each of the scope categories individually, let's put some rounds through these scopes. We'll start with the short range first. We're presented with 2 stages, and I'll describe the stages in detail now. Targets seen in this video were brought to us by Targets USA, which offers competitively priced and uniquely designed AR500 steel targets. Check out their wide selection from the link listed below. And now back to the video. Stage 1 is a transition drill showing movement through targets that are close together, then driving the gun to targets that are spaced far apart, and then back to close together again. Mike will serve as the control shooter for these stages. Actual run times are shown. Let's go! Stage 2 had some shooting through barricade windows, then some shooting on the move, and ending with barricade window work once again. Let's go! Now that we've put some rounds through CQB distances, let's stretch out a bit and see how these optics perform at long range, also on timer. But first, we'll need to take a look at the long range reticles and decide which one is going to work best for us, and then we'll perform some much needed upgrades to our AR rifles to maximize accuracy for that long range. So when it comes to shooting long range, the reticle design is very important. It can be somewhat subjective because, for example, I may like a leaner, more uncluttered reticle for fast shooting, but obviously that's going to be lacking some features like range finding, a smaller number of wind holds, etc. You may want a reticle with a ton more features and it's going to be a little bit more cluttered. With that in mind, I'm going to list how these stack up from least to most useful long-range reticle. Bringing up the rear is the Swarovski BRTI crosshair reticle. It's a simple second focal plane reticle, so it makes sense for fast shooting up close and functional shooting at range. It does lack some functionality that most first focal plane reticles have. However, just looking at our Strelic holds, we can see that 50-yard zero holds are easy to remember along with some basic win holds. A step up from the Swaro is the Kahles 3GR reticle, a 3-gun version of that G4B reticle. The subtensions take it down further than the Swaro to 800 yards and is a mix of MOA and mils in that you also have mil-space win holds, so there are more of them versus the Swaro. The holds are also relatively easy to remember with our 50-yard zero. Moving into first focal plane options, and at a close second place, we have the Nightforce FCDM reticle, with its combination of 0.5 mils and 1 mil gradations throughout. Starting at 400 yards, you also have this 10 mil wide ladder with 1 mil spacing all the way out to 900 yards. Really well thought out and easy to remember. My only gripe is that, like all first focal plane reticles, at 8x, your center reticle is pretty large, so you just learn to ignore it. And taking the top crown is the Vortex EBR reticle, available on both MOA and mils, with MOA shown here. The elevation holds take you out to 600 plus yards, while your win holds are clearly labeled from 5 to 20 miles per hour in 5 mile per hour increments. What really separates a Vortex from the Nightforce are the ranging reticles available at the top and bottom. So sort of like the primary arms ACSS, put your target between them and measure the shoulder width and you'll have your target range. Two barrels, mid-length gas, $300. Let's go. Thanks to Criterion Barrels for sending us these 16-inch hybrid barrels to serve as the heart of our new uppers. We completed our builds with forged receivers and 13-inch MCMR handguards. For your next barrel, we would highly recommend checking out Criterion. The links are below. Let's go. The long-range stage has IPSC silhouette targets from 200 yards to 500 yards, spaced approximately 100 yards apart. The shooter will have 30 seconds to hit as many targets as possible, starting from near to far and cycling through again in that order. All hits and misses are shown. Max will serve as control shooter for this long-range stage, so let's go. Time. Time. In summary, now we've looked at all the optics, put them on timer, we've got all the data out there. If you were to choose based solely on which one of these optics won the most categories? The Vortex Razor. In my opinion, I don't think the movement to 10x is that useful. I think actually the 1 to 6 looks a little bit clearer to me. I more than likely recommend a 1 to 6 unless you absolutely wanted the most magnification and shooting like 600 or 700 yards. This is an excellent scope and actually happens to be the cheapest of them listed here. Which ironically, if you were to ask me, hey man, if you had unlimited money, which optic would you buy out of all these four? And I would say the Kahles. But then again, I prefer a light, uncluttered reticle with good illumination. You know, it doesn't have the best, but definitely very usable, good illumination. And the zoom lever spins very smooth and very fast. All right, hopefully that's useful. We'll see you guys next time. If you find this video useful, please like, comment, and subscribe, and visit us on Facebook as well. Lastly, if you're looking for ammo, check out our sponsor, Impact Ammo. A discount code is available in the description below, along with all other equipment. We'll see you next time.